So not too long ago, I found myself in Guangzhou, China for about a week. And you may be wondering, Kate, what are you doing in China? I was attending my grandpa's funeral. Yeah. But otherwise, I was also there to visit family and sort of just explore China a bit more because I wasn't really that familiar with what's going on. And also, my folks wanted to really take me out and see a few other things. So I wanted to, go over a few thoughts about China and really compare its development to China as of 5 years ago when I last visited. And also, of course, compare it to the wonderful land of Australia that I know a lot more about. And also in this video, I'll also give a few travel tips as well for people who are looking to go to China. Travel tips that I don't know if other people would necessarily talk about. So let's get into it. This time I only stayed in China, or rather in Guangzhou, for the entire week. So I was in Guangzhou. This is where I was born. This is where I was raised until the age of 4 when I left on a much more permanent basis. This is where my grandma still lives, and this is where my aunt still lives. So yeah, we were kind of just chilling there. I didn't really visit any of the other neighboring areas aside from a couple of spots for the purpose of the funeral. So yeah, aside from that, we were mainly sticking around the Guangzhou metropolitan area. We took train trips, very short ones though, so I'll talk about those in a second, but yeah, I don't think we went that far. First thing I noticed when I was in China is they seem to have greatly improved the climate. And what do I mean by that? I could see the sun. This was not something that I could do 5 years ago, or even 10 years ago. I had a trip to China, the first time I ever been to China after I left. It was a 3-week trip, and in all 3 of those weeks, 2 in Guangzhou, 1 in Beijing, no sun, except for like 1 day. So that was bad, but this was a lot better. The sun was there. It did rain, but that's not too bad. Obviously, kudos to China for fixing their sky. The sun, now being a bit of a mainstay in Guangzhou, is a pretty big W, because as someone who grew up in Sydney, the sun is a big mainstay in our sky. So yeah, gotta love that. It's kind of one of the most basic standards that I have for any country, is to be able to see the sky. As a general rule, if I could do that, I'm in a somewhat better mood. Let's just say that. And thus, my opinion of China has now greatly improved. Of course, when I was in China, this was during early mid-July. So what this means is that it was the height of their summer, and it turns out that China, like Japan, gets humid. So what that means is when I'm stepping outside of my hotel, I'm sweating balls. Yeah, not fun. Very, very sweaty affair. We're walking around a lot as well, so basically soaked from head to toe, and not in a good way. Right? What does that mean? It means that for those who are looking to go to China, my recommendation, if you're going during the summer, polo shirts. They're very, very good. We ended up buying a bunch, which is why the day of the funeral, when I was wearing a black business shirt, like one of those black business t-shirts, or the shirts that people wear when they're performing in music, that was not fun, as it probably shouldn't be, but it was doubly uncomfortable with that shirt. Yeah. The days were around about 35 degrees Celsius, which is 95 degrees Fahrenheit for the Americans out there. Yeah, pretty damn hot, right? Now, Guangzhou, at least, is a city of 2 very distinct states of quality. And what do I mean by that? There are places where everything looks very, very modern, and then there are places that look like they haven't been renovated since 1842. And they may have been bombed, and still not renovated, since 1842. There are entire cities that are currently being built, as far as I can tell, where every building, i.e. the apartment buildings, they look exactly the same. Now, this reminds me of some drone footage that I saw on Reddit of North Korea. I think it was someone in China managed to sneak a drone past the border to capture some footage of North Korea. And provided that's not all Western propaganda, there are cities in Guangzhou that look eerily similar. So, yeah, look, maybe it's the Sydney-sider in me, But when every building looks exactly the same to the point where even the color scheme matches, it's a bit creepy for me. Bit way too creepy for me. Now, I also visited some places that look very close to what we actually have in Sydney, and there are, of course, some suburbs that I visited as well, where my parents grew up, and they are full of those kinds of buildings that probably didn't have any working air conditioning. There was also a fully functioning temple where people visited to practice Buddhism, so that was really, really cool, and really, really beautiful as well. But right next to it was another temple, where people go to practice consumerism. That's right, I'm talking about a great big shopping center. So, yeah, quite the dichotomy that I witnessed there. Of course, everything in China, speaking of shopping, is pretty damn cheap. Not ludicrously cheap, but still pretty damn cheap. What do I mean by that? I bought 3 of these shirts for $300. Sorry, 300 yuan. So 100 yuan each, roughly, thereabouts. The exchange rate from yuan to dollary dues is basically divided by 5. So what that means is I bought 3 shirts for $20 each, which is kind of unheard of in Australia. Well, no, that's not true. There are places in Australia where you can buy shirts at ludicrously cheap prices, but yeah, they're few and far between. In China, they're kind of everywhere. So yeah, not a single shirt that we bought at all is past $30. And these are like polo shirts. They're sort of thick-ish. They have like a design on them, and they stick around. Here's a tip. If you're buying anything shirt-wise in China, best proofread them. I think we bought a couple of shirts that are nonsensical in every possible way, because the English that they use on it, because for some reason it is popular in China to wear a shirt that has English on it, doesn't make any sense or is misspelled. Like, very, very misspelled. So, that is still a thing. We did, of course, keep an eye out for sales when we were buying clothes, and there were some very hilarious signs. There was a sign that said that all of these items were 90% off. Not 10% off, pay 90%. No. 90% off. You don't see that here in Australia. I've seen 50% off. I think I've seen 60% off. I've never seen 90. That's insane. Also, on top of that, food can be pretty damn cheap as well. I think every day we bought like these egg tarts, 4 for like 10 yuan, so 4 for about $2.50, which is just nuts. And then we also had like a big family dinner. Me, my folks, my aunt, my uncle, so all 5 of us. The bill came out to 500 yuan. $100 for a big dinner of 5. And we weren't holding back either. Plates and plates of like duck and pork. Good stuff, right? So yeah, it's pretty cheap. Traveling on the train is also stupidly cheap as well. We did a lot of one-way trips because each one-way trip ended up being 3 yuan. 3 yuan. 60 cents. Meanwhile, in Australia, if you want to do a one-way trip, it's $2 if you're lucky. Yeah. It might not necessarily be that China is ludicrously cheap. It might just be that Australia is incredibly expensive. But yeah, train trips will really chump change. So I was ultimately using my phone to purchase all of these little green tokens that you use in order to get in and out of the train station in order to catch the train. So yeah, that was actually kind of cool. Speaking of buying things with your phone, stop if you've heard this before. The Chinese local economy, i.e. shops, restaurants, trains, yada yada, seems like they all work exclusively off Weixin. Well, Weixin is a payment service that's tied to WeChat. Alipay is its own separate thing. This is essentially some kind of gross monopolization that I guess Zuckerberg dreams of, but it does make WeChat the most popular chatting app in China. Not just because it's a chatting app, but also because it's essentially how people buy stuff. Essentially, when you want to make a purchase in China, one of 2 things will most likely happen. The shop will either display some kind of QR code for you to scan with your phone through WeChat, or the shop will ask you to bring up your own QR code on WeChat for them to scan. So in Cantonese, you would tend to ask them, 我數你，你數我. Am I scanning you or are you scanning me? Here's the thing. We had the bright, brilliant idea of getting a travel card, i.e. a prepaid international travel card from our bank. This makes perfect sense, right? It is a prepaid international travel card. So on the off chance you end up losing it, well, whoever stole your travel card is only stealing however much you've actually put on it, as opposed to your credit card. So that's good, right? The problem is that when you are making purchases through something like WeChat or Alipay, it gets categorized as an ongoing payment, as in the same kind of category that phone bills get placed in. And at least with this particular international travel card, it tries to deny ongoing payments. As a direct result of that, I ended up my payments declined a lot, which basically meant I was the baka gaijin, the silly foreigner who was just standing there in a 7-Eleven trying to buy a coffee and somehow not understanding the concept of paying things because I just straight up can't. It reached a point where I basically was like, Dad, I need you to come to the 7-Eleven and help me buy this coffee. I ended up living off red packet donations from my aunt, which is the saddest statement you could possibly make. So, my recommendation, don't do that. Heed my advice, don't bother with those international travel cards. Just, I guess you're going to have to stick to using your credit card through WeChat. If you're going to go to China, then you may want to set it up with your WeChat before you go because it takes like a day, I think. You also need to put in a fair bit of personal information, for example, your passport. I think you need to do a face photo scan and stuff like that as well. It's finicky, but once you get it through, it's a one and done thing. So, best to get it sorted out before you head out. Oh, and if you're going to start a WeChat account, it seems like you have to be at least sort of semi-vaguely active on it, because there may come a time if you're inactive where the government will just step in and like lock your account, apparently, as a matter of law, from what I've seen from the UI in WeChat. So if that happens, the way that I've found to unlock it is to actually have a friend contact in your WeChat account help you unlock it by telling the system that it's legit. So you better hope that all of your friends are still sort of vaguely active on WeChat, otherwise you're kind of screwed. So I guess nowadays I kind of sometimes use it to send things to my cousin, even though the both of us are in Australia. But yeah, that's a bit odd. I suppose it makes sense that China is going very contactless. After all, it is basically what we're doing here in Australia as well. In Australia, we do tap and pay. In China, it's basically the same idea, except they're using QR codes. So that's kind of cool. That being said, though, sometimes they use the same machines that we use here in Australia. So I almost reached with my phone to tap and pay, but then I remembered, wait, silly. Google is banned in China. There ain't no way tapping with Google Pay is going to work here. So that's when I remembered to actually use a damn QR code. Speaking of Google being banned in China, well, I was using some good old-fashioned data roaming. And so data roaming, turns out, beats firewall in the rock, paper, scissors scenario. Whenever I was out and about, I had the more or less fully unblocked internet that I was used to here, meaning I could enjoy and possibly even disseminate all of the wonderful anti-CCPP propaganda that I had to my heart's content, and then get arrested. So yeah, obviously I didn't do that, but it also meant that I could catch the Natland teaser trailer on YouTube when it dropped. So that was nice. I'm literally watching YouTube videos in the middle of China. And checking my Gmail in China. Strangely enough, though, using 5G on an international roaming data plan from the same phone company that I'm currently on right now, ended up with very, very fast speeds. I don't know how this happened. Like, one day I ended up with 95 down, 38 up, which is... Okay, I realize for the Koreans out there, that's like, what the hell kind of snail's pace is this? But for us Australians, that's a damn miracle. Or you're paying through the nose for Telstra. But I think most of the time it was 9 down, 9 up. So, yeah, kind of is what it is. Also, yep, VPNs work in China, but the hotel Wi-Fi was so garbage that it kind of didn't matter for the most part. I was also able to play Genshin without using a VPN in China. but it was still 200 ms ping, so oddly enough, no improvements there. Speaking of hotels, if you're going to China and you're a foreigner, you have to stay at a hotel for foreigners, which is not necessarily a hotel packed with foreigners. It's just a hotel that takes foreigners in. If you want to live not in a hotel, you have to actually tell the authorities where you're living within 3 days, I think. Otherwise, if you get caught, you might get deported. I wouldn't mess with that. We decided to not bother with that smoke, so we stayed at a hotel instead. Yeah. Now, another thing to briefly talk about is that if you're going to China and you can't read Chinese, here's the thing, okay? I'm not going to tell you to, I don't know, boot up Duolingo and start learning Chinese, because I'm Chinese and I don't know how to read Chinese. It was impossible for me to learn the damn language, right? So instead, what you want to do is you want to bring someone who can. Preferably someone who can read it, first off. And then obviously preferably someone who can speak it, if you can't even speak Chinese. If you're in Guangzhou and someone only knows how to speak Cantonese, you are probably fine, bare minimum, so you could potentially bring me, I guess. But if you're anywhere else in China, best to find someone who can speak Mandarin. So not me. This is how scuffed it was for me in terms of the language barrier. There are plenty of folks in Guangzhou who can totally understand what you're saying if you ask them things in Cantonese. But then they'll respond in Mandarin. Bro, I asked you in Cantonese because I was hoping we could at least communicate in a language that both of us have some affinity with. Instead, he starts yapping in Mandarin. Not entirely conducive to a conversation between us, is it, folks? And now I have to guess what he's saying. 我不知道普通話。我用廣州話嚟問你一個問題。點解你會用普通話嚟答我個問題？我哋明明喺廣州。係呀。Also, perhaps it's because I didn't go to any tourist traps. I don't even know where the tourist traps are. But all the menus that I came across were in Chinese. It's entirely possible it's because my parents kept taking me to places that are Chinese, not tourist traps. So maybe that's the difference. But that also meant that I couldn't read any of the menus. I didn't even really bother to crack out Google Translate because I kind of already had a translator. My folks! So yeah, it did get a little bit awkward though when I was just standing in a Macca's that didn't have anyone working in the front counter, so I couldn't even be like, 想買一個漢堡包? I couldn't even say that. Because the menus are all obviously in Chinese, but also the menus are phone apps. Phone apps that I didn't have. There was apparently a way of navigating through WeChat to the Macca's phone app, but I didn't know how to do that. Luckily, the manager was able to help me out throughout the entire time, so that was why I was able to actually get something from Macca's without, staying there for 3 hours just losing my mind. Now, also on top of that, my cousin and I, as well as my dad, we went out drinking one night, and that was fun. We went to a pub, one of the pubs in Guangzhou, but I couldn't help but notice that half the people in the pub, the patrons, as well as potentially the staff, they seemed suspiciously underaged. At least they look suspiciously underage. Now, it's entirely possible that our Asian genes are really kicking in, once again, where people can be my age and look 14, allegedly. But a quick internet search would suggest that there is actually a legal drinking age in China of 18, which is basically the same as what we have here in Australia. America, take notes! But if that's the case, I don't know, do the people of China know that? Because I'm gonna be real here, half the folks here would have been carted out. Meanwhile, I came across what appears to be the Bustling Supercenter. They sell this very, very strong, somewhere between 30 and 60% alcohol, by a barrel. The kind of metal barrel that you would need a ladle to scoop it out of. So that's kind of nice. I think the barrel was going for about 5 grand Chinese. So a grand here. Worth. I've never had bustling, but I had something else though. Now, I don't really know what the English name for this particular drink is. don't even think it has an English name. But either way, in Cantonese, it's called yi wo tao. Yi wo tao. 53% alcohol. Taste of fire. So, not necessarily something I'd recommend, but at the same time, something I'd recommend. Yeah, that's my 1 week experience in Guangzhou. In the end, I guess the conclusion is it's better than it used to be. And the big takeaway is my opinion of Guangzhou, and by extension, all of China. That's right, I'm having all of China represented by specifically Guangzhou, is better. Maybe I'll go back again with friends. Or if something happens, we'll just have to see. But otherwise, I probably won't survive there. Because again, everything is in Chinese and I can't read the damn language. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. How do you feel about China, I guess? Have you been in the past however long? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, hope you guys enjoyed this. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more China stuff. I mean, I'd be shocked if this ends up blowing up to the point where I should start doing more China stuff, but I guess if that ends up being a thing, sure. But yeah, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for that, and until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.